Hello, hello, and welcome to Break Check, a Rocket League Esports podcast. I'm your host, Hoodyhooo, and today we're going to be talking about North American Regional Number 2. This is also the first regional that has been deemed a name other than just the regional and what number it is. I did want to touch on that just before we dive into some of this, some of this discussion about these teams and their performances and the gameplay throughout the tournament. So this regional was called the Haunted Hallows Cup. You probably saw it on the branding of the main channel. I was actually fortunate enough to broadcast for E United during their day one of the main event for the Swiss stage. And in my instructions, I was actually informed that I'm not supposed to call this a North American regional. I'm supposed to call this the Haunted Hallows Cup. And so over the past week, we've done a little bit of discussing on the Twitch channel about what could that imply? What does that mean? And I think we have had a little bit of a confirmation because we saw this European second regional has now been deemed the BMW Open. So this is something that we kind of touched on a little bit throughout the week with the stream. We didn't know, does that imply that Rocket League could begin to use these events as something that they could, throw some brand deals on or some sponsorships and things like that. And so I'm sure there are mixed opinions about that, about the naming for some of these things, but it seems like they are potentially opening up another stream of revenue or something like that. So, in my opinion, all in all, it's a good thing. We like to see the growth of the esport. We like to see more brand deals and sponsorships jumping into the Rocket League Esports space. I think that is promising for the future. It indicates that the esport is healthy and trending in the correct direction. So that's just something I wanted to touch on real quick. And with that, we're going to jump straight in to discussing the close qualifier of this regional number 2. North American regional number 2, this is the close qualifier. So what the close qualifier is, if you're not familiar with the system and the format and how this works, the close qualifier, it takes the bottom 8 teams, points-wise, for the Rocket League Championship Series, and slots them into the closed qualifier. There are 16 teams total, so that leaves 8 spots at the bottom that are open for qualification. So what we have is an open qualifier that actually ran, the weekend prior to the main event. That open qualifier gives us 8 teams, which move into the closed qual. Again, I know it's kind of confusing, but it's a 16-team Swiss format. The top 8 teams from this closed qualifier are going to slide into the main event. So our 16 teams that we're looking at are Ghost Gaming, Torrent, Vibrance, E United, the Sonics, Nefarious, Rbg, Rogue, Accelerate, Pittsburgh Knights, Integrity Esports, Team DVS, KCP, Charlotte Phoenix, Top Left, and Shopify Rebellion. And we got lots to talk about with these squads. We've had some trending forwards. We've had some trending backwards. We've got some new faces. This season has been quite the change, and it's been really exciting because the events have become a little more elite, a little more competitive. Last RLCSX, last season, we had 32 teams qualifying for the fall events, and now we only have 16. Obviously, that is a lot more elite competition. It's much more difficult to qualify into these events. But with that being said, we're still seeing some new faces and some relatively unknown players, at least to the mainstream viewer, qualifying. And so I love it. It builds on my admiration for the open qualification circuit style system for pro play. I think it's so much better for growth long term. These players that are not, if we kind of compare it to the old system of RLCS and RLRS, these players that are not already in those leagues, they now still have something to grind for. And we're seeing them still, qualify into these events and get some high-level experience. So I love this new format. I think it's fantastic. So let's look at how this Swiss stage unfolded throughout the closed qual. We got Torrent. And Torrent is a team that ended up having a player plucked off their team, Percy. In the offseason, Percy ended up leaving Torrent and taking a spot on XSET. And XSET have performed very, very well throughout the season. So I think that was a great move. And Torrent, Percy left big shoes to fill, and Torrent slides Kinsey in his spot. And man, in my opinion, I didn't think that was a bad pickup by any means, but I think Torrent has absolutely exceeded expectations. Like I said, Percy left big shoes to fill, and they've done a great job this season. Now, when we look at Torrent's performance in this closed qual, man, this is impressive. We got a 3-0 against PK, a 3-0 against E United, and a 3-0 against Vibrance. Two of these three squads ended up qualifying. They were top 8 at this event right here. So, a straight 3-0 sweep in matches, and they only dropped one game. Hats off to them. We got to give them credit. Ghost Gaming also slides through with a 3-0. They take down Rbg, Rogue, and Nefarious. And all three of these teams actually end up qualifying. So great stuff here for Ghost. They've looked really incredible throughout the beginning of this new RLCS 21-22 season. Sliding in with a 3-1, we got Sonics, Vibrance, and E United. Sonics, I'm not surprised to see this at all. They have looked really, really solid. They were a team that I was kind of sleeping on at the beginning of this season, and I've explained this a few times on my stream. They are 3 players from 3 different teams, and, I just wasn't sure how that was going to unfold, how they were going to mesh, what the chemistry was going to be like. I just didn't know. And they have, again, like I said about Torrent, they have exceeded expectations, in my opinion. They end up dropping their first series in Game 5 to E United. Then they take down PK, they take down Integrity, and they take down Rogue. Strong finish here from Sonics. Then we looked at Vibrance, and Vibrance is actually a team that is in the mainstream viewer, they're probably an unknown team. But these are 3 players that have been around for a long time. They've been grinding for a long time, and I am optimistic about this team. I think this team has a high ceiling. I think they have pretty big potential, and I went so far as to say I think they could even be a top 12 team. I was talking about this preseason. Unfortunately, Vibrance did miss out on regional number 1. They couldn't make it happen. They couldn't qualify. So I was happy to see this team kind of turn things around in regional number 2. They end up taking Rebellion down 3-0. Accelerate, they take them down in Game 5. They lose to Torrent, and they take down Rbg in Game 5. These are 2 tough series right here to win. 2 very high-quality teams. So Vibrance, good performance. E United, another team that unfortunately missed out on regional number 1. And I do want to touch on this for a moment because this team has received a ton of backlash over the last year. I don't know if I would say hate, but definitely a lot of criticism at the very least. That they were a roster of Tristan, Wondamike, and Ajax, and they ended up dropping Wondamike for Dapper throughout the RLCS X season. And then after the season, they drop Dapper and they pick up a player in Savvy Seal. Savvy Seal is he's a player that's been around the scene for a very long time. He has not made it into RLCS or RLRS, but he has been right there on the cusp of it for a long time, and he's worked very hard to, achieve the level of play that he can. And E United, they end up, they pick him up, and the thing is your average viewer, they don't keep up with the bubble scene. Your average viewer doesn't keep up with stuff outside of your main Rocket League stream, and so I kind of understand where the skepticism comes from. But I personally, I know Seal. I've coached Seal on a team before, and I know his work ethic and his drive and dedication to be a top player. And so I was excited to see him get an opportunity. And I think this team will continue to improve. I don't have them as a top 8 team, probably not this season. But if they continue to work hard, I think they can threaten a top 12, top 10 spot. But they've got some improving to do. They've got some work to do. Again, I am happy to see them qualify with a 3-1 performance in close quals. That's pretty nice. They end up taking down a strong Sonics team. They take down Devious, who qualified for regional number 1, and then they take down Nefarious, all in Game 5s too. That says something about their mental fortitude. Game 5 is never easy to close out, so that's promising for E United as they move forward. And then the last round here, we've got some teams qualifying here with the 3 and 2. We've got Nefarious making their first appearance in a regional. We got Rbg making their first appearance in a regional, and we got Rogue squeaking in yet again. We'll touch on Rogue really quickly because you guys probably know this team. We're aware of this team. They had a tough offseason. First Killer ends up leaving the team, going to FaZe, and hey, look, we just got to call it what it is. That is a spot that very few, if any, players can fill. The hole left in that team. Rogue brings in Gyro, and this is no knock on Gyro. He's an incredible player, but First Killer is something special. And so Rogue this season, I don't think people expected them to maintain the level of competitiveness that they had throughout RLCSX, but I don't think people expected this performance from them. I think we expected a little bit somewhere in between. Right now, it seems like Rogue is underperforming from our expectations as a community. With that said, I do have hope that this team can turn things around. At times they look solid, and at times they look out of place and they look outpaced and just confused as a team. But I again, like I said, I have my fingers crossed. I hope that this team can start to work things out and figure out how they want to approach things. Let's talk about Rbg and Nefarious. These are two teams that, we mentioned that last season in RLCSX there were a few more spots, right? And this season, RLCS 21-22. There's 16 spots every single regional. Last season, it didn't work like that. In the fall, in RLCSX, we had 32 spots, right? That's double. In the winter, we had 24 spots per regional, and then in the spring, we had 20 spots per regional. And Rbg and Nefarious made many appearances in regionals throughout last season. So both of these are very high-quality teams. Like I said, they missed out on Regional 1, but they are right there on the cusp of being a consistent top 16 team. I think they're going to have to clean up their performances a little bit. I think one thing that hurts these teams is the fact that they're just kind of on the outskirts of things. They're probably not getting scrims against your top-level teams. They're probably not getting many opportunities to compete against those top 8 squads. And so, we're going to look at this. They qualified, and they did well to get in through – they did well to get through the Close Qualifier into the main event. But when they get into the main event, they start to struggle. And like I said, I think it's just because of a lack of experience against those teams. I think if teams around that, top 15, top 20 level got more experience against those top 8 teams, they may see a little bit faster improvement rate. They may deal with that a little bit better, but it's just the struggle of being an outskirts team, a Tier 2 Rocket League Championship Series team. So we look at Nefarious performance. They 3-0 Charlotte Phoenix. They 3-0 Integrity. They fall to Ghost and E United, and then they 3-0 PK. So when Nefarious are hot, they look really good, right? They don't even drop a game in the series. And then we start to face some of these teams that are qualifying, a little bit higher competition, and it gets a little tougher. Same kind of thing for Rbg here. When we're facing teams that did qualify, we kind of, we may trade series with them. We may have a little bit tougher time. But when we're facing teams that are unable to qualify, they got a little bit better performances there. So, congrats to these these 4 teams right here. Vibrance, E United, Nefarious, and Rbg are all first-time appearances in Regional number 2. So congratulations to those teams. Well done. I do want to quickly glance down here at the teams that were unable to qualify through the closed quals. We have Team Accelerate. This is a team with kind of an awesome story. This is the Zookeepers roster from last season. And again, I mentioned how the regionals last season were a little bit more open, right? There were more spots, and Zookeepers were a mainstay in regionals. They made many of the regionals. I think they may have missed out on 1, maybe 2 throughout the entire season. They didn't make just a ton of noise when they made it into the regionals, but they were there. They were there very consistently. In the offseason, there was a tournament run by an organization, the Houston Outlaws, which I think is the organization or the team that is kind of over Accelerate. And so the tournament was basically to find the next RLCS team. And so what it was all these teams like Vibrance was competing in it, Zookeepers was competing in it, teams like Top Left. I actually think the Integrity Boys may not have been picked up yet, and they may have been competing in it. I can't remember exactly who all was in it, but my point is a lot of these unsigned bubble teams, these Tier 2, Tier 3 RLCS squads, were competing for a chance to be signed by an organization. And Zookeepers, they ended up winning that tournament, and they are now signed to a contract, which is awesome for those players. I love to see that. And Accelerate, I expect to see them in at least a regional or two throughout this season. They've been very close in Regional 1 and 2 to start off the fall split here, but I have faith that they can poke into a couple here. PK, they've had a tough offseason, I think, moving into the beginning of season 21-22. And throughout the offseason, they actually, so I mentioned earlier, Percy moves to XSET. XSET ended up dropping AlphaKep, and AlphaKep replaced ZPS on PK. That was during the offseason. PK ended up missing out on Regional 1, and shortly after, they ended up making a second move, right? So they brought in a player, Omar Maton. Omar has never been on an RLCS or RLRS team, very similar to Savvy Seal earlier. And in fact, a neat little fun fact is the team that I coached actually featured Savvy Seal and Omar Maton. And I'm really, really, really excited to see both those players getting opportunities on high-level teams. I think they both deserve it. They're both very hardworking, very dedicated players. And I am expecting PK to continue to improve as they get a little more comfortable. They just made 2 changes to the roster, and that's just going to take time. It's going to take time, but I expect them to get a little bit more consistent with their performances as the season unfolds. Integrity. They are a team that had a ton of buzz, and right underneath them is DVS. These 2 teams made it into regional number 1. They are relatively unknown teams and players in the grand scheme of things. But with that said, both are very talented rosters. Integrity is a roster similar to a G2 play style or a true neutral play style or, Giants over in Europe. Just a very fast-paced, very high-risk, high-reward strategy. They are in your face. In fact, Blaze is a player on Integrity. In regional number 1, he had this insane statistic of being literally in the air more than he was on the ground, which is absolutely insane to think about. So Integrity and DVS, like I said, they made Regional 1. Unfortunately, missed out on Regional 2, but I expect them to bounce back and potentially make some noise later throughout this season. KCP, another roster that had some changes throughout the offseason. Kind of a unique situation here. KCP, they picked up Wanda Mike, who was teamless, and they added him to 2 of last season's Ghost roster in Mektos and Joe Freshness. And at the same time, they held on to Kronovi. So they've actually got 4 players, and the way they've been approaching this is they have Freshness and Mektos as kind of starters, I guess. They have solidified their spot in the starting roster, and they have been rotating Kronovi and Wanda Mike in and out. So there are some mixed opinions about this, and I know that some people think that may be a good strategy or a great way to approach things. My personal opinion, I think it's just kind of a hairy situation, especially with how things began with this team. We've got a lot of new parts, right? It's not like we have a team of 4 players that have grown up together through the scene and trust each other and have a lot of team chemistry. These are players that, KCP had 1 player, Kronovi, signed to the roster. We had Wanda Mike, who was teamless, and then we had 2 that were on a different team, and we plugged them all together. And I think it's just kind of a difficult situation for those players to be placed in. I don't have much more to say about that, but I do wish that team and that roster the best of luck. I hope they can find a solution that works for those 4 players and improve their performance because they have unfortunately missed out on both regionals thus far. CLT, another team that had shoes to fill. Andy ends up leaving the roster in the offseason. So Delta and Bisabonium pick up Alraz. And with that, they did squeak into regional number 1, but now they have missed out on number 2. And, it's just not a great performance. And I don't know if this team just needs a little bit more time to get their chemistry going. I don't know what the issue is here, but same for these players. I have my fingers crossed, and I hope that this team can improve their performance as the season unfolds. We got top left here, and top left or top lay, however you want to say this. They are a team of very high-level players. Thunda was a player that was in RLRS for a season, I think 2 seasons actually. We have Creams, who was longtime Alpine sub. Many of you probably know or have heard of Creams before. He's played in many RLCS matches as the Alpine sub, and he's done a fantastic job. He's an incredible player. And then Parth. And Parth was on multiple teams last season that ended up making multiple regionals last season. So this is a really strong team as well. They failed to even make it into close qualifiers for regional number 1. But now they're in this close qual for regional number 2. But unfortunately, we're not able to make much noise here. I do think that team, with more time and more work, I think they will begin to make some noise and get a little bit more consistent and be a little bit more dangerous threat, at least in this level. Maybe not in the top 10, but at least at this level. And then last, but certainly not least, we have Shopify Rebellion. And we have got to talk about this for a moment. If you are not up to date with the Shopify Rebellion roster, they are going through a tough time right now. One of their players, Beast Mode, he's taking a break from Rocket League. And I'm not going to speculate on why. He's got a twit longer on Twitter if you would like to go check that out. But Shopify Rebellion is struggling. It doesn't matter what team it was. If you pluck a player out and you try to slot the sub in and expect the same performance, it's just not going to happen. My thoughts are with the Rebellion team, with that management and staff, and I hope that they can get something worked out. It sounds like they are going to hold off and play with the sub throughout this first split and look for a player during the trade window after the fall split. And my take on that, I think that's actually a pretty smart play. If you try to rush into things and find a replacement right now, your opportunities and your potential candidates it's going to be a smaller pool of people, smaller pool of players. When we come to that trade window, there's no telling how things are going to shake out. So I think that's a good play for these guys. And like I said, fingers crossed for Rebellion. I hope they can bounce back because they were looking so good. I think people were starting to, consider them a top 5, top 6 team. And unfortunately, things just kind of unraveled from there. But like I said, I hope that team can bounce back. So we've got 8 teams qualifying. We got Ghost and Torrent, Vibrancy United, Sonics, Nefarious, Rbg, and Rogue. So let's jump over to the main event. That was a close qualifier. Those top 8 from the close qual are going to meet the top 8 teams in points. So we look here. We got FaZe. We got NRG, Space Station, V1, XSET, Envy, G2, True Neutral. Man, oh man. North America has gotten a lot stronger as a region. Gotten a lot more competitive. For a long time, we had this whole Big 2, Big 3, Big 4 trend in North America. And I don't think it's like that anymore. It's definitely still top heavy. And after we get past, 8 or 9 or top 10, things start to kind of fall off a little bit. But those top 6 spots are very competitive, and these teams are beating each other up, which I think makes the region a lot more fun to watch. So let's look at this. Let's look at this Swiss stage for the main event. And oh my word, G2. I mean, look at this. G2 was on fire. They 3-0 Ghost. They 3-0 Space Station, and they 3-0 XSET. And my word, I mean, just pure domination. And this is not a weak schedule. No, this is not a weak schedule. Let's look at this, by the way. It's a top 8 team. Ghost makes it. This is a top 8 team. Space Station's in. This is a top 8 team. So, G2 3-0s teams that qualify. So let's jump out here to Envy, the other 3-0 team. They take Sonics to Game 5. They end up taking FaZe down in 4, 3-1 scoreline, and then they end up taking NRG down in Game 5 as well. A very strong, tough schedule for Envy. So, we're looking at G2 and Envy in the Swiss stage, and we're thinking, man, those two teams, those are probably my favorites moving into the main event because of their strength of schedule here and then their performance throughout the Swiss stage. After that, we've got NRG here with a 3-1. True Neutral and XSET with 3-1s as well. NRG definitely did not have the strength of schedule that these top 2 teams did. With that being said, they did take care of business when they needed to. True Neutral. They 3-1 a pretty strong Torrent team. They ended up falling to Game 5. They ended up falling to XSET, in Game 5 with a 0-second goal from Percy, which I am going to pull up for just a moment because this is absolutely insane. We're in Game 5 here, okay? We're in Game 5, True Neutral XSET. Notice this clock. 3, 2, 1. Okay, watch this. Hoxer, Percy off the ceiling, off the backboard with a double touch At 0 seconds, XSET clutch this game up. Let's look at this again. This is crazy. Hawks are up. Percy off the ceiling. And he finishes the double touch. And again, that's at 0 seconds. That's game 5 to take the victory over True Neutral throughout in the Swiss stage. So, we mentioned Percy earlier and how those are big shoes to fill on Torrent. And Percy has been doing his thing with XSET. As a roster, XSET has been doing their thing. And I think they're probably very satisfied with their performance this season. But that's a clutch win from XSET to take down True Neutral. True Neutral go to Game 5 with RBG, which, RBG has to be excited about. And then they come back and they 3-0 phase. They 3-0 phase. That's impressive. That's just what it is. That's impressive. So shout out to the True Neutral squad. They're looking good. They're heating up. Let's look at the performance from XSET. We got a 3-0 against Rogue. I mean, I hate to say this, but that's probably what they should do. We just saw where they took a clutch Game 5 against True Neutral. They dropped 0-3 to G2, and hey, we just got to shrug that off because look, G2 3-0'd everybody, so you can't be too upset about that. And then they take Torrent to Game 5, and they end up clutching up in round 4. So props to XSET. Now, let's get to the juice. This is where things get wild for the North America region. We got Space Station, Version 1, and Ghost qualifying in round 5. All right? And I'm actually going to talk about V1 and Ghost really quickly, and then I'll flash to Space Station because that's one that we got to give some attention to. So Version 1, they start off a little bit slow against Vibrance. I think they should probably beat this team more times than not, but I also think Vibrance they're a great team, and they can definitely take wins off of anybody in this tournament. So then they bounce back and they take Game 5 against Nefarious. They end up dropping 1-3 to FaZe. They take down Sonics and Torrent 3-1 to qualify for the main event. To be honest, this is Version 1. This is just what they do. They make things a little bit more difficult than they should be. They love to go to Game 5s. It seems like they love to go to round 5 in the Swiss stage. I think V1, I mean, who knows? Maybe they just don't like their fans and they want the fans to struggle with maybe heart issues or something. I don't know. But V1, they make it happen when it counts. And to be honest, they've looked really good this season. I think that roster should be excited about their performance so far. And if they can continue to improve, hey, we might be talking about them as a top 5, top 16 before long. All right, let's glance at Ghost really quick. Like I said, 3-0 to G2. Look, shrug it off. It is what it is. They 3-0 E United. And then look, they 3-2 Space Station. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. They drop 0-3 to NRG. Hey, it is what it is. And then they come back and they bounce back and take Vibrance down 3-1. I think Ghost has to be riding a high from this performance right here. You lose to the two teams that end up in the finals of the event, and you take down Space Station in a clutch Game 5. So, you got to be happy about that as Ghost Gaming. With that being said, let's glance at this Space Station performance. So they come out 3-1. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, I actually got to broadcast E United against Space Station. I got to follow E United throughout the day. I think Space Station did not have the hottest start. They started a little bit slow. I think E United is probably a team that Space Station should be taking down 3-0, 3-1. They didn't look bad by any means, but they certainly weren't dominant. And then immediately following that game, they go down 0-3 to G2. And then following that game, they go down in Game 5 to Ghost. And right here, ladies and gentlemen, this is where things fall apart. Okay? And this is why the Swiss stage is so wild and so fun. Okay? And not only right here, but this is like this and these performances impact the playoff bracket. Right? And so them dropping this game is what ends up resulting in FaZe Space Station playing in round 5 to qualify for a top 8 spot. Okay? So that means one of Space Station or FaZe is not getting top 8. And that is massive for implications as far as points. And, we'll pop this points chart up just for a moment. FaZe sitting at 451. In Fall Regional 1, they won it with 301. And then we look at this, and they had a massive drop-off here because they didn't make top 8. And what this has done is this has made things very, very tight for the major spots for the end of this split in Sweden. And it's going to come down to the wire. It's going to depend on the performance of 3 or 4 or even 5 different teams as we come into this third regional for North America. And look, I never want to wish ill on any team. I want them all to perform to the best of their ability. But I'm also going to say this: FaZe dropping this and not making top 8 has made things a lot closer. And as a viewer, as a consumer, it's a lot more exciting. It's a lot more exciting. These teams, it's a tight race. It's not totally decided who's going to make it in. And it's it's pure chaos, which, again, as a viewer, it results in a lot of fun. So we'll glance down here. Torrent, they end up falling short. But we look at this, and we got good matches across the board. We don't have any 3-0s. Torrent did not get 3-0'd by anybody. They take Xset to game 5. They go 4 with V1 and True Neutral. And those 3 teams are consistent top 8 squads. And so Torrent, in my opinion, of course, you're frustrated that you just missed out, but you got to be okay with this. You got to be satisfied with this. We're making strides in the correct direction. We're improving as the season goes on. So I think Torrent's got to hold their head up high and just keep moving forward. FaZe, they're flustered and frustrated. I do want to touch on this for a moment. We got a 3-0 against Rbg. In this Rbg series, FaZe, they weren't taking things super serious. They had a game or a couple games, I guess, where Aleutian really wasn't even playing in a normal rotation. He was just running around chasing demos. And look, I don't think that's a problem, but I think that you may, if you're not super focused and you're not laser, locked in the zone, it may be tough to turn that switch back on whenever you do come up against a team that is a little bit tougher. And yesterday I listened to the First Touch podcast, and they said, well, to be honest with you, they said that I don't think that matters at all because they bounce back and they fight and they bring down V1 in a 3-1. But I just don't know that I agree. I think, my philosophy is just, it's a premier event. I'm on a premier team. And I just think I should be trying, if I was involved with the team, I would encourage them to try their hardest at all times and just not mess around, just take things serious. And, if you do that, if you don't have those demo chase games, then people aren't going to be mouthing about, oh, well, they weren't taking it serious. They weren't doing this, right? If you're try-harding and you're sweating and you're giving it your all every single time, nobody can say anything. And so that's what I would always, if I was a player, that's what I would always do. I will guess, or I will assume that FaZe, they probably won't, that probably won't happen again. I imagine they're going to be stone cold serious at all times. And the reason being is because you can't afford to do this. You can't afford to do this. Every single regional, every single game, every single match is very, very important in qualifying for, majors and then for worlds throughout the season. So, to be honest with you, if we're gonna have a little bit of a slip up, and I think NRG had a little bit of slip up in the first regional, if we're gonna have a slip up, now's the time to do it. And then as we move forward, we learn from it and we do better in the future. They may not agree with me. Maybe they want to take it loosey-goosey and just have some fun, and that's fine too. Everybody's got their own strategies. But my thoughts are, if I'm on a team and I'm in a premier event, I'm giving 100% sweat, try hard every time. Let's glance at Vibrance real quick with a 2-3. They were they were in round 5, so close to making it. They take down V1. They got to be excited about that. They go down 0-3 to NRG. They go down 0-3 to Torrent. They take down Rbg, and then they end up losing to Ghost. I'm sure it's a frustrating performance, but, in my opinion, Vibrance can't be too upset. Not too bad. Not their best stuff for sure, but not too bad. They made it in. They got some points from it. If we glance at this ranking chart, Vibrance made one single event, and they're already ahead of many teams because they made it a couple rounds further. So with that being said, Vibrance, I think they should hold their head high. Sonics, this is definitely not their best stuff. I know that this team is not happy with their performance on this day. And so I expect them to bounce back. Rbg, I think, hey, especially after game 1 with those shenanigans that went on, to bounce back and take a series against Sonics, you got to be proud of that. And then take True Neutral to game 5. Hey, you got to be excited about that. You got to be excited about that. So Rbg, not bad. Not a bad first performance for a regional. Not bad at all. Rogue, like we said earlier, we hope that as the season goes on, we hope that they continue to improve and become a little bit more consistent threat in the top 10 area. Nefarious and E United, again, both first-timers here in the regionals, and they end up falling out with minimal success. And, as much as I want these new teams to succeed, it's going to be tough when you get up here, right? It's going to be tough when you get up here. So you shake it off and you move on to the next one. I think something that these teams have to remember is that top 16 is nothing to be upset about. Top 16 in North America is nothing to be upset about. You got to hold your head high, and you just got to keep moving. So that's kind of how the Swiss stage unfolded. Now let's take a look at the bracket, the playoff bracket. So one thing that we want to note here is, because of how things unfolded up here with Space Station falling in at the bottom, okay, we have got a stacked lower half of the bracket. We got Envy on this side. We got NRG on this side. We got Space Station on this side. We have a stacked lower half of the bracket. And this is why, we flash back just a moment. We say every game is important. Every series is important. That Swiss stage, those Swiss stage games can impact your seeding here and where you fall in this bracket, and can make things a little bit easier or more difficult for you as you go through this playoff bracket. So stacked on the lower half, tough draw for these teams, but it's how competition goes. So at the top, we got G2 versus Ghost, and we got True Neutral versus XSET. And one thing I do want to note is, with these 4 teams at the top, that means one of these 4 is going to make it to the finals. So, we're looking at this with hindsight right now. We already know G2 is there. We already know how it unfolds. But when we saw this bracket, that's exciting, because none of these teams have made it to the finals before. And to be honest with you, I don't think if you were to hand the community these 8 teams right here, and you say who makes the finals, I don't think many, if any at all, would predict any one of these 4 teams to make finals. And so with this bracket unfolding in the manner that it did, it was quite exciting to see one of these 4 squads that was going to make it in. So G2, Ghost. Okay, this series was actually wild. Ghost come out hot. Look at this. 4-0 in game 1, 2-0 in game 2. And then what happens? G2's new coach, Sathu, calls a timeout after game 2. And I don't know what he said, but whatever it was, it flipped the switch for G2. And they were off to the races. They were done with the games, and they were off to the races. G2 comes roaring back, and they don't drop another game. 3-1, 3-0, 2-1. Little OT there. Goes fighting hard, and then a 2-0 to close things out. G2 back on track. We got True Neutral versus XSET. True Neutral gets revenge for that 0-second clutch goal from Percy. They take down XSET in a 4-2 series. We look down here at Envy and V1. Hey, this was a tight matchup, and I know it's a 4-2, but V1 actually looked pretty good playing against Envy. I think most people would agree that Envy's a little bit higher caliber of a team. They got better results, but V1 keeping it close. V1 playing competitive. They got to hold their heads high, and they got a top 4 finish in regional number 1. They got a top 8 finish in regional number 2. V1 is right there fighting for one of those top 5 spots moving into the major in Sweden. So V1, they got to be satisfied with these things, and they just got to come ready to play in regional 3. And then we got, look, this could be a semifinal match. This could be a finals match, and we get it in quarters. NRG versus Space Station. And, Space Station did not play bad at all. Their performance was fine, but it just looked like NRG was a stronger team on the day. It just looked like NRG kind of had their number. Nothing too crazy from either squad, but NRG just took them on the day. And then we're gonna move forward to semis with G2 taking down True Neutral in a 4-1 series. After this Swiss stage, right, with G2 going 3-0, there was a lot of people, including myself, that were a little bit skeptical. I wasn't sure if they were going to be able to replicate that, right? I didn't know, are they going to come back in and just start waxing the floor with the competition, or are we going to see a little bit more competitive gameplay from both teams? And started slow, and then they turned it on. This True Neutral G2 series, it was a lot of fun to watch. These 2 teams have very similar play styles, very fast-paced. They're both teams that excel offensively. They have times where they play nice and consistent defense, but both teams are prone to being a little bit overly aggressive, though sometimes it works in their favor. But G2 just had the number on the day. True Neutral takes game 1, and then again, G2, 4 straight, boom, 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 boom. So G2 advanced to the finals. And then we look down here at NRG and Envy, and oh my word, was this a series? All right, so we look at this. Envy comes out, takes the first two. By the way, first game is a literal 5.5-minute overtime. NRG takes game 3. And then Envy takes game 4. So Envy has a 3-1 lead in the series. By the way, that's an 8-minute and 41-second overtime. Envy has a 3-1 lead in the series. And they just cannot get NRG to go away. They cannot close out the series. NRG fights back and ends up taking Envy in game 7. There was an interview from Rbg later on that kind of touched on that, and he said he was very satisfied, very excited to beat Turbo, take him down on Turbo Field. So, great win from NRG. And with this, NRG makes it to the finals. Now, one thing that we do need to, I want to mention, I want to talk about for a moment, is that NRG knew going into this event that if they win regional number 2, that clinches a major spot for them. So that's an important note. Some people said that may add a little bit of pressure to things. My personal thought, it doesn't add a lot of pressure, but it probably does give them a little bit of motivation, makes them a little bit more hungry than normal to compete and to win on the day. So NRG, they end up losing the first series, all right? Losing the first series to G2. And the first series, I got to say, I was worried. I'm an NRG fan. I'm an NRG fan, and I was worried. G2 came out hot. They were demoing left and right. Incredible offensive pressure. And it just looked like NRG was struggling to deal with it. What I will say, though, is as the series went on, it seemed as though NRG started to become a little bit more acquainted with that play style. It seemed like they started to be a little more prepared for demos and bumps, and they were able to evade those, which kept their rotation intact. And as we can see, NRG ended up bringing it to Game 7. So with that being said, I think G2 had an incredible performance, and they were playing really well. But when you're playing really well at maybe not your peak, but you're playing really well, and you're still getting dragged into Game 7, I think that's a little cause for concern. A little cause for concern. And it's easy for me to say that in hindsight, but we look at this, and I think that is correct because we bounce back into series number 2 of the set, and NRG sweeps it. 4-0 sweep. It was absolutely dominant. I mean, G2 could not get anything moving in the second set. And then we go into set number 3, or series number 3 of the set. And it's very similar where G2 takes a single game. So NRG, they had maybe the toughest road that you could have. They take down SSG in the quarters. They take down Envy in the semis in Game 7. And then they essentially reverse sweep the best of 3 set of best of 7s against G2 in the finals. So there's no dispute that NRG deserved this event. They played phenomenally. This is just what NRG does. They are a tough team to beat. They are very consistent. They have a ton of experience. These players have all been in situations where they're facing adversity, and them going down 3-1 in a series is not going to make them crack. Them going down the first series in the best of 3 set is not going to make them crack. They're going to do their thing. They've been there before. So props to NRG. They played a great event. Props to G2, a great event as well. And G2 also, they gave themselves a very, very optimistic chance or promising chance for the Sweden Major. So I'm excited to see that. And with that being said, that will conclude our discussion about the NA Regional number 2 or the Haunted Hallows Cup, whatever you would like to call it. But before we get out of here, you guys can probably see, I think it's right down here. We got a little segment down there, a little topic called Second Touch, okay? And the reason I call it that is because the main channel, Rocket League main channel, hosts a podcast hosted by Daz, T-Bates, and Roll Diz. And one thing that I'll probably do every now and then is I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that they talk about because I love watching that show. I think it's a fantastic podcast, and I think they have some really unique insight on things. So, I do want to touch on those things. And yesterday's podcast was actually incredible. It was super, super fun to watch. There was a lot of very cool information that they covered. And my favorite part is that they brought in Garrett. And so I do want to talk about a couple things here because they touched on some topics that we talk about on the stream quite a bit. So one that I know is a polarizing topic, and many will become frustrated as we begin to discuss this, is the topic of Drees on G2. So what I first want to do is I want to let Garrett talk about Drees and hear his opinion and what he thinks about this. And then I'm going to bounce to a little bit of a discussion from Corelli. Corelli talks about Drees as well. And then I want to give my 2 cents and my thoughts on that after they do.
Give me your thoughts on G2. Give me Garrett G's thoughts on Drees, because I've got thoughts, but I want to hear you first. Give me thoughts on Drees.
I think Drees is good. I think he needs to get off West Ping. I think that's a problem. That's hard. But I also think in my honest opinion, him being like 15 and being in these situations that he's been in, like right off the gate, like he wasn't even on a team before he's in a spring major final. I think he's done well. I think he has a lot of potential. Like that first series, he was amazing. I think the pressure got to him after that. Like I feel like if G2 were to stay with him and support him super well, I think he could be really good. Like he has all the tools to do it. He just make some mistakes in major moments, but he's not the only one making mistakes. I mean, JNaps was making just as many mistakes. It's just I think Drees right now is kind of their scapegoat because JNaps and Kago are so good on offense that I feel like JNaps or even Kago's mistakes on defense are kind of not looked at as much as Drees' because he's not a part of that duo that JNaps and Kago are. I think he's really good. Like every time we played him, it's felt like he kind of added that big like delay game they didn't have. Like I think, which could they improve? Like if they would have gotten a first killer or something, I'm sure they would have. First killer has already proven himself. He's already been in those situations, but I think Drees might be a risk worth taking unless they have for some reason they get like a top 6 player from NA. Besides that, I don't see anyone really being worth the change, in my opinion, because I think he's good. I think he's done very well for the situation he's been put in.
I know we're going to talk about G2 later. So.
All right, so I could not agree more with Garrett. I think that he pretty much summed it up perfectly. Something that, again, if you hang around the Twitch stream, you've heard me talk about this. Drees was placed in an atrocious situation. He's 15 years old. He's got 2 legends on his team that are expecting to perform at the top of the region, top 3, top 4, top 5 team. He had big shoes to fill in Rizzo, and it's just a tough situation to be in. And with that being said, he has absolutely excelled. He has exceeded expectations, right? Garrett says he thinks he's good. He's got plenty of potential, that type of stuff. He also is realistic and says, look, if G2 maybe was able to pick up first killer, yeah, sure, of course, maybe they would be better. But he also says he thinks Drees is a risk worth taking unless they have potential to grab something like a top 6 player in North America. Okay, so with that being said, now what I want to do is I'm going to fast forward a little bit because later on in the broadcast, we get Corelli giving his thoughts about Drees.
I'll chime in here because I got words about G2. I think G2. I think the way they played this regional was like almost peak G2. Like the way that they went through Swiss was incredible. Like they beat some pretty darn good teams too. Like these were not just like wimpy wins. Beating Ghost, like Roll Diz, your boys are pretty good out there. 3-0ing Ghost, 3-0ing Space Station is a massive win, and then 3-0ing the Exet boys. Like those are all very quality teams I put at least in the top 10. Right, in North America, and to come out and go 9-0 on the day is huge. And then, of course, taking down, a team like Ghost again, obviously in top 8, and then a team like True Neutral. Sorry, no, but then they come out and they do well against. I tweeted, I said, True Neutral is a really unpredictable team, and to control a team like that really says something about your play style. And then I thought it was really important that they came out and won the first series against NRG, because a lot of people are saying, well, G2 got a little bit of an easier side of the bracket, but if they had met NRG in the semis and the same thing happened in this series, they would have beat NRG in the semis. So if they had one best of 7, they beat him in the first one. I think that counts a lot more than maybe winning the second one or something like that. But I got to say something to the G2 fans and to people out there, especially on the internet world. Stop talking about Drees. Stop it. Stop I see so many people say, oh, well, Dries didn't perform well like X in this tournament because he's really inexperienced. But then they want to say they want to put Daniel on the team. What RLCS stream have you seen Daniel on?
None.
Zero. He's
I love
got
you, Dan.
no experience. I love Daniel too. He's going to be a great player. But he has, if anything, the exact same experience that Dries had coming in. And Dries has performed phenomenally. When Garrett's talking about the very specific play style that G2 has to play, Dries is doing that perfectly. And if anything, you should be looking at JNaps in this tournament because he didn't play that well. It was Dries on the back line being that last man to buy time for that monster of a player for Chicago to get the ball back in his hands and make something happen. So I don't want to hear anyone talk about Dries anymore other than how great he's played, because he has been phenomenal. And every single time G2 loses, everyone's like, well, I guess we'll just wait for Daniel. And it's like, what do you mean? There's no experience on Daniel, and you're criticizing Dries for not having experience. What on earth is the argument there? Dries has played fantastic for G2. There's some adjustment there, and there's still agreeably some experience needed for Dries, but the fact that he's been able to come into this roster and play with two legends is amazing, and he's performed extraordinary for the positions that he's left in. He's left 1v3 against Envy half the time. Like, I mean, come on, man, he's performing.
I do want to say, because and I wanted to talk about this because this is a topic that we talk about on here quite a bit, just because we have been speculating about Daniel and where he may end up and this type of thing. And the team G2 does come up in that discussion. And, one thing that I want to say is I don't think that Daniel being a potential opportunity is disrespectful to Dries. I don't think that's what that is at all. Look, a player like Daniel doesn't come around very often. And there are probably only like maybe 2-3 teams that are not entertaining the thought of adding him to their roster. And I think it's just, look, here's what I think. I think a lot of people are letting their emotions talk here. Dries has been placed in a very difficult situation, and Dries has answered the call like a champion. He has played incredibly. He had to slot in at the middle of a season in one of the toughest competitive seasons of Rocket League history, and he's performed. He's done very well. But I want to talk about, we mentioned the lack of experience with Daniel. Okay, well, the lack of experience is there with Dries as well. If both players lack experience, if the G2 squad in JNaps and Chicago, if they deem a higher ceiling potential with Daniel and they think that they could become a better team long-term with Daniel, I don't think it's crazy for them to entertain that. I don't think that's crazy. I don't think it's disrespectful. And look, it's competition, okay? It's not about fairness or who deserves what or your emotions or feelings towards things. It's not about that. It's about winning. And if JNaps and Chicago think that they could possibly have a better chance winning and competing at the highest level with a different player, then that is their choice to make, not ours to condemn, right? So my thoughts on it are, I don't think it's disrespectful to Dries. I think if something like that were to occur and Dries doesn't end up on that team, he's going to end up on a top 8 team. He has shown his value, he has proven his worth, and he's an incredible player. And I know, at least when I'm discussing this, I am not intending to disrespect Dries. I think he's done a phenomenal job and exceeded any and all expectations on him sliding into that role to replace Rizzo. So, some of this like frustration and whatnot on discussion is, I don't understand the frustration. It's competition, and these people are looking to be the best. G2, look, they've got some good performances here and there, but the reality is that they're going to have to be a little bit better to beat teams like Rbg. We're talking about, look, they even just said G2 is almost at their peak. They took the first series, and they still can't do anything. They still can't beat NRG. And that's the standard that you're chasing. That's the team that if you want to jump them, you have, like, if you want to be the best in the world or the best in North America or the world, then you got to jump them. And so, we heard Garrett say, I think the only way that they could entertain a change would be a top 6 player in North America. Well, look, I think there may be an argument or people may think, or G2 players may feel as though Daniel is that type of player. They may feel he's that caliber, and they may not. G2 may not even be entertaining this. G2 may have already solidified, hey, we're not making any changes. It's Drees, do or die, that's it, right? And that's fine too. I'm not saying that they need to make a change. What I'm saying is I think it is totally reasonable and totally justifiable for them to entertain the possibility of making a change. That is my point. So I wanted to talk about that for a moment because that is a hot topic, a common topic on the stream. We talk about that regularly. And hey, I'm excited to see how this whole thing shakes out. And I have no doubts that Daniel will land a great spot, and whoever Daniel ends up replacing, because it's probably going to be somebody on a solid team, I have no doubts that whoever he replaces is also going to find a great home as well. But what I will say is I am super excited to see it unfold when this trade window does occur. Now, I want to show a couple more things, and this is because these are things that I value very highly. I think it's very important, and I think your average RLCS viewer probably doesn't really think much about this. So right here, they're talking a little bit about FaZe and this, demo,
neutral,
fiasco,
then,
whatever. Which again,
lose.
And they all say it too. It's not a big deal. It's not like people don't need to freak out about it, right? And the thing is, it's like, look, who does it impact? It doesn't impact anybody but their own team. So it's really not a big deal, and I don't think it should be a big discussion. But what it did do was it sparked Garrett's topic about just mentality and leadership and like your character as a player, which is important. These intangible aspects of a player, you can measure shots, right? You can measure saves. You have statistics in game. You can't measure leadership, right? You can't measure how you respond to adversity. You can't. There's not a statistic to measure that. And this is something that Garrett talks about, and it's something that a lot of professional players need to improve.
I wouldn't say it's all a honeymoon. I think First Killer is really hard to play regardless of what team on. The thing that I have for First Killer before, he's amazing. I want to say, but like the next step in his career, if I was looking from the outside, not even as a player, like I need to see him do poorly on a team and then bring that team back to playing well. Because for Rogue, for me, it felt like only like 2 events they did super well in, 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
They won Regional 3 winter. We beat them in the major, and then they won Regional 1, and then after that they fell off. Never came back ever. First Killer is still playing well, but how you affect your teammates is very important. And unless First is just going to keep hopping, I want to see him like bring his teammates back up once they have a poor performance. I'm not saying he can't do it. I just haven't seen it yet, and he also hasn't been around super long, so it's definitely possible. It's just I think that's when you're trying to build a legacy as a player, that's important as well.
So I just wanted to talk about that for a moment, or actually not even talk about it, but let Garrett speak on it, because, I think it's one thing where when I'm sitting here talking about these things and I say my piece on it, a lot of people take it with a grain of salt because I'm not a pro, because I'm not a coach, because I'm not involved, right? And so if you don't want to hear it from me, take it from a long-time legend that has been around the scene since the very beginning. Leadership, your intangible qualities, your character as a person is extremely important, critical, vital to a team's success, okay? And like I said, this is probably the poster child for Rocket League professional players and how to conduct yourself as an individual. And that's what he's talking about. He's saying, look, yeah, incredible mechanics, incredible ability on the field, incredible talent, but that's not all there is to being a pro. That's not it. There's more to it. And I think I was so excited to hear Garrett say that on the main broadcast, because it's important. And I don't think many viewers understand that, that dynamic, that how things impact you as a team and whatnot, like behind closed doors. That's a little bit of discussion from Garrett on First Touch. And guys, if you like this type of stuff where I'm yipping and yapping, you've got to go watch that. They do such a good job. And like I said, they provide some very unique insight on different topics around Rocket League Esports. One thing I don't have it exactly marked. I don't know exactly where it was, but Garrett was talking about in regards to the endpoint discussion. Right now in Regional 1, no one had expectations on endpoint, right? Like no one was saying endpoint first place. You're predicting BDS, you're predicting Vitality, that type of stuff. So now, after they go through and they destroy teams, they beat Carmine Corp, they go in and they beat BDS. Now that dynamic is shifting a little bit, right? now people are going to have expectations on them. And so what Garrett said was like, hey, you saw BDS and you saw them get frustrated when they were losing, when things weren't going well. And you saw Endpoint. They're smiling, they're laughing, they're having fun, right? It's easy to do that when you have no expectations on you. When you are the defending regional champion, it's going to be a little bit tougher to laugh things off. It's going to be a little bit tougher to have as much fun because now there are some expectations that come with that. So I thought that was really important. I love that Garrett talked about some of these different things like leadership and the dynamic of competition and how that impacts players and their mentality towards things. And so, man, big shout out to Garrett, probably my favorite player of all time. I think he conducts himself in a very professional manner, and you just have to put some respect on his dedication to the craft because, you know, a lot of players that were professional when he began are no longer professionals. But he's continued to maintain his run and his stay at the very top of things, and I got a lot of respect for that. And so, you know, big shouts to Garrett, big shouts to First Touch. That was an awesome episode. It always is. This may be a kind of a recurring little segment here at the end of things because I think it's fun to talk about some of the things that they discuss. But with that being said, that is going to conclude the first live episode of Break Check. That was covering North American Regional number 2. I appreciate you all for hanging out. Thank you so much.